Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are listening and joining us from. Bienvenidos. Here we are together for Cultivating Voices live poetry on this, for me, Sunday, September 12th. I'm Sandy Yannone. I'm your host. I'm the author also of Votes for Women from Salmon Poetry. And as I mentioned, joining you today from Olympia, Washington, here on the Pacific Coast. I wanted to begin today's reading. It's only been 6 days since we've been together because we had our incredible Labor Day reading with Lily Ledbetter on Monday, Labor Day. But today, only 6 days later, I really wanted to acknowledge that here in the United States and of course elsewhere, in the past 24 hours, in past week leading up to yesterday, September 11th, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which an event that has really created worldwide connections and certainly grief across, not just in the United States, but really everywhere. It was a worldwide engagement. I want to say that I appreciate so much everyone who's been posting poems acknowledging the anniversary and the connections with humanity. If you haven't had a chance yet to be on the site, I encourage you to spend some time there reflecting with those poems. And again, my deep gratitude to folks who shared on the site. And again, I want to thank everybody for our labor of love, our poetry readings, and our last one on Labor Day with Lily Ledbetter from the Lost Horse Press Anthology, Raising Lily Ledbetter, Women Occupy the Workspace. We had editor Carolyn Wright and Eugenia Toledo joining us from Chile, the co-editors, with a spectacular smattering of poets from the anthology. And I couldn't have been more thrilled than to be having that second annual reading, and we look forward to next Labor Day. Well, here we also appreciate being able to provide you every week a virtual venue with a tremendously enthusiastic audience for our readers and members, and our over 2,900 folks worldwide who've joined Cultivating Voices live poetry on our Facebook group. We are an international, intersectional, intergenerational group. And today we welcome a segment of that group here in our live audience. And I want to say a shout out to those of you watching us on Facebook Live as well. The chats here are live, both in the Zoom room and on Facebook. So please, please, please send the big love out to our readers today during our new books showcase. You know, the pandemic has raged on, and there's been just so many peaks and valleys. And so one of the things that I am very happy that we're able to do is continue to celebrate that art continues to thrive and that we can support the poets with their new books coming out. It's been a very different way to launch a book in the pandemic. And I'm grateful that we have been a small part of helping make sure that your words continue to get to the folks that want to hear them. Well, we have a beautiful, beautiful quartet of poets today that I've been looking forward to hearing since early in the year when we organized this reading. You'll be hearing today from Lori Wilson, Darla Himelas, Kenneth Steven, and Grace Cavalieri. First up today will be Lori Wilson. And I want to just say Lori was the one that set this reading in motion. The first person that we organized for the reading, and it then all fell beautifully, beautifully, beautifully into place with each of the four readers. So thank you so much, Lori, for setting the stage and the scene. Lori Wilson's most recent poetry collection is The Dream Women Called, which was published this year by Autumn House Press. Her poems have appeared in journals such as the Southern Poetry Review, Salamander, the Laurel Review, and Cimarron Review. She's joining us today from Morgantown, West Virginia, where she works as a software developer and teaches a poetry workshop in affiliation with really, again, another group of poets that I truly admire and love the work that they do. The poets from Mad Women in the Attic of Carlow University. So would you please join me in welcoming Lori Wilson?
Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and I can't express enough my thanks to Sandy and her gang for putting these readings together. It's an incredible service to those of us whose books came out in a time where in-person readings were not really possible. So thank you so much. I'm going to be reading primarily from my book, The Dream Women Called, and then I'll read a couple of newer poems. The Well. I was born without a meadow. No grouse hid, no red-winged blackbird skimmed a path, no grass lay flattened by wind. If inside me was a well, I didn't know it. I walked on cracking ground, expecting thorns. Rocks cut my feet. I slipped in mud. I ran, unsteady, ran in driving rain, in snow, on roads, around the cars, the sidewalks icy. Inside me was a well I couldn't find. I had no center, only wobble, rock, rock, and catch. Two sparrows on the porch wall pecked at scattered seeds, their rhythmic dip and rise held steady in the wind. I ran, kept running. How I wanted to sink into cradle of hip, hinge of knee. How I wanted to fall over the well lip and down, clear to the bottom, and lean against the muscle of that throat. The title of this poem is a line from Gerald Stern's Winter Thirst from American Sonnets. And what the void was like. What I feared. Being abandoned, deserted, no vacant, as in tenantless, having never been filled, inhabited, lived in, taken up. The missing floorboards, how to cross, therefore, how to get up in the morning, while outside the milkweed pods swelling and bursting. Weightless, as in to walk down green to the bridge, to the river. For that I needed the sidewalk's grab, else out of control. Lacking, without, no, less than lonely loss, rather null, the empty set. Tunneling into cotton or dust, there was nothing to push against. I was so thirsty. The field's burning edge. Say it's your field, your ripe corn licked by flame, and you squinting helpless while summer, more than summer, goes up in smoke. Every day I drove by the cornfield, bright stalks simply growing, nothing to figure out. My prize for bearing what's incomprehensible, waiting, predictable, bountiful, world licked by flame. What a cornfield can mean beyond corn. I said, help me. I said it again. Say it's you squinting helpless at the field's burning edge. Say it's yours. Crystals from Red Cloud Mine. When an orange slice breaks from the fine-grained matrix of rock, I tweezer it into my palm, nudge it over and back. Either way, a flicker of light. Tomorrow, Norwegians see the sun eclipsed, while here, a supermoon hangs hidden by the same sun's glare. When I first saw the red fox on High Street, I was giddy with luck. But then I was ashamed. Of course, the fox was dead. I'd like to hold something that's breathing. Once, my soul slid into my body, entering at the shoulder, twining around muscle and tendon, like a mirrored morning glory that, instead of waiting for sun, reached down, threading light through the wrist's fine veins. This next poem describes an installation by Nathaniel Lewis. The installation was called Make Believe in a larger exhibition called Bigger Than You. Possibly slower. I would rub dry husk against bark, slither out larger. Can a person create a self from what confines her? I saw a giant bear seated on a gallery floor, stuffing spilled from a gash where a tiny bear sewed itself of cloth torn from the big bear's belly. If I resist the day, is that lazy? The energy required to act is large. I know, patience, industry, diligence, etc. My poinsettia leaves turned red long after Christmas. Possibly slower doesn't equal lazy. Across the field, the gray house, its evolution took years. Even now, the additions part yellow, the boundary crooked where yellow meets gray. Reprise. If I went back to Cusco's worn, smooth steps, its skinny dogs barking from corrugated rooftops, this time, could I bear it like the black-booted woman who carried her striped sling of grass bundle wider than her height, her back unbending? The first time this body broke open, holy sacrament, this is my body. Bright lights, stainless steel, the OB's slow sutures. Firstborn, daughter, this is my body, drink. And she did. Her birth-mashed face, my blood's fading mark on us both. If I took the train, if I crossed the bridge, if I stood again on dead woman's pass, placed my rock with others on the cairn, Then would the dam of this body break and the darkness rush out like a wind and light sweep in like the tide. A few admissions. I'm trying not to lie anymore. Mostly, I speak less. It would be easier if I could be sure of the truth. Today, I'm the gutter sagging across the street, not quite enough. Maybe a bird's nest, maybe a clod of wet leaves weighed it down. Below it, the wind has swept a small pile against the yellow curb. The mailman shuffles envelopes pulled from his bag, slides them into a box. I like to imagine they're letters, not bills. I had the idea to pick up a seed or a leaf or a stone on each daily walk, set it on the table, maybe sketch it, maybe even in color. I'm trying to get closer to truth. So far, I haven't picked up anything. Last night, I was trying to remember the music I'd loved on Chestnut Ridge. I didn't want to make up that story and filled my living room with Mozart, Copland, Gershwin. The shock of it in the silence, the sudden urge to bow down. And I'll read two more poems, and these are, like I said, newer poems since the book. Three things. First, the windshield clear as, well, glass, clean glass. And the pleasure of that after a year of looking through condensation gone dry and spotty. And the unaccountable pride for this tiniest of long procrastinated tasks finally accomplished. Second, the irises, too open, the rest purpling, ready to unfurl, and the mental note to look again, to see how and when the stems form, punching up through green blades. And the pleasure of that, what I said was, they're like old friends come to visit. Finally, Bruiser, the neighbor's dog, pressing his broad face into the hole in the fence, whining. I scratched him under his white muzzle, glad for the company, the persistent question, do I matter? For a moment appeased. The ephemeral whispered, yes. And finally, pruning the forsythia. Excuse me, I have to close my window or you're going to hear a lawnmower through this poem. Just a moment. All right, you might still hear it, but we'll consider it accompaniment. Pruning the forsythia. Because of the tick I found on my pants after pushing through canes blocking the sidewalk, because the YouTube video said never prune a forsythia straight across like a hedge, I sat on wet ground looking for the oldest canes, which the video said should be cut to the ground when the blooming is done. I pictured the twig it was when first I planted it and the butterfly bush that died here, cracked apart in a thunderstorm, and the tomatoes and peppers one summer, and the wildflower garden, trillium, columbine, wild geranium, phlox. Also, the regal hemlocks crowding the house when I bought it, roots breaking pipes and threatening foundation. How they crowded me too with worry until I gave in, and the arborist came with cherry picker and chainsaw. And I was both relieved and grieving for them, for everything that came before. Because I needed something to thrive, because I loved the way in March the yellow flowered canes moved beyond the window's frame and gently swung the little birds. I started sawing the biggest cane close to the ground as I could. I sawed as light disappeared and a sparse rain began, sawed with weak, wobbly strokes through what I should have let go years before. Thank you so much.
Gosh. Wow, how beautiful. Thank you, Lori Wilson, for starting us off today in our new book showcase. The new book is The Dream Women Called, published by Lost Horse Press. And I'm just struck by that line. The ephemeral whispers, yes. And it made me think about how much that's what our poems are always doing, aren't they? You know, they are taking the ephemeral, and if we're listening, they continue to whisper yes to us. So thank you so much for being with us today, and congratulations on the new book, of course.
Thank you.
Well, we move next to Darla Himelas. And Darla, when I had learned about Darla's book and had read about, I had seen the title, Cleave, and I was like, wow, what a title. It makes me want to open the book. It makes me want to cleave to the book. And that relationship just continued and continued. And then the good fortune of Lori suggesting maybe Darla will read. And so I've loved this cleaving as it's emerged over time, to finally bring you here to Cultivating Voices to read from your new book. Well, the more formal biography is this, my friends. Darla Himelas is the author of Cleave, as well as the chapbook Flesh Enough, both published by Get Fresh Books. You can find her writing in recent issues of Honey Literary, Orange Blossom Review, Ran Off with the Star Bassoon, Nailed Magazine, the Massachusetts Review, and Lesbians Are Miracles. She lives in Philadelphia, as Kim and I were talking about, the city of love, with her wife, her kid, and her 2 orange cats. Welcome, Darla.
Thank you so much, Sandy. What a warm and beautiful introduction. Thank you to you and to Cultivating Voices and to Lori for thinking of me for this. I'm so happy to be with you today. So this is the cover of Cleave. The cover art is by Dawn Surratt. It's published by Get Fresh Books. And I'm going to read mostly from Cleave and then one newer poem. So the first poem in the book is called The Self in Transit. I turn, pretzeled with pillow, tray table rattling, the brass handle of a hardwood door, and open it, between the eyes centered in the brain and the sun-bled orange behind drawn eyelids. Transparent, childhood's home thickens, solidifies, and my skirted self enters a mud-footed old-souled child, 1984. I proceed 10 parquet paces, kneel before the yellow wraparound couch where I peeled grapes beneath blood-lusty arrows they flung. I hum a little fiddler, a little Dayenu, and this I swear. My chest pain sings the sprout of new ventricles, my nausea, the sudden flurry of irises blooming at every house I ever loved. And as I open my eyes' old windows, the flight lands like dust. I meant to set a timer and forgot, but it's okay. The next few poems deal with domestic violence, so I wanted to give you that heads up. This is called Clip. Darren, age 3, spins nickels on the parquet floor in big wobbly circles, as I, age 6, build castles out of Vanessa's baby bottles. Nickels flick from his fingers mechanically, their sound smothered under Dad's curdled curses, Mom's loud whispers, sudden screams. I turn finally from his nickels, my castle, find my mother crouched, head clutched, heaving, my father gripping a fist of her now detached hair, a blonde nest he shakes, threat still streaming from his cracked voice. Turning back, I lunge to where Darren plunges a nickel into his wet mouth, face darkening to violet. Mom's shaking him upside down, Dad slapping his back when the nickel tumbles through spit to the floor. Tony the cat. Against the garage door, hurled Tony like a javelin in his tuxedo coat with his animal shriek, a body Dad could twist in his hands, a soft body, proxy for Mom's, or mine maybe if his rage had ever been tempted. Tony survived, as did we all somehow, before disappearing like 3 dogs before him, no matter how many flyers Mom and I stapled to telephone poles, no matter how many shelters we entered begging. Goldfinch. A goldfinch bounds down to the concrete field, nosing florets, feeding on seeds, as I pace the cracked schoolyard track. Far away, metal gate, my mom leaps and blows kisses like a woman scissored out from a storybook. Black and gold jacket, cherry red nails, sky blue shadow. A woman once clobbered and cut in the kitchen of a house with not enough locks and too many windows. I still hear the shriek of glass and speak its broken language. She leaps, waves 2-armed and blows kisses. I wave back low, stomach level, wondering, is she crazy? My gaze blurring toward wings and ragged greenery beneath the schoolyard fence. Cheeks hot, belly shimmering from olive to gold. I am then feathery, limbs streaking ebony, new muscles tingling, impossibly floating toward the gate. So my wife and I were married 12 years ago, and soon after getting married, we wanted to have a kid, and we now have a beloved 4-year-old. Like a lot of folks who have been on fertility journeys, ours had a lot of stops and starts. And FedEx played a role. So this poem is called For the FedEx Guy. Oh, warrior of ice and snowbanks, trooper of duty and pride, how timely this delivery despite your 1/4-mile hike up my drive. You say I'll have to sign for it and hope I'm warm inside. You say the weather will change tonight. You are my prophet, dear FedEx guy. You pass the box with a shrug, to which I dare not reply. If only you knew what millions were frozen inside. If only you knew what you carried, Mr. FedEx guy. Come inside, I say to the box, as you stride safely beyond my voice. Have a seat. There once was a man called 5549, lover of art and sport, teacher and fire dancer, a man of good genetic line, who walked into a Pasadena health clinic. Yes, 5549 was used to the protocol, but still double-checked the lock before opening Playboy or Playgirl and cradling the plastic cup that caught his white gold to be whisked away and locked up, twice tested for all conceivable diseases and divided into vials you wouldn't believe how small. And when I called after digesting the online catalog, requesting 1 vial of 5549, the woman said yes, 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 just like that. And all women said yes then, and my belly fluttered. From hand to hand to hand, van to plane to truck, hand to hand again, my millions of motile swimmers have landed here. Thank you, FedEx guy, for shepherding my little men all the way to Maine. I'll take it from here with my wife, needleless syringe, and 4 slippery thighs. Conception poem, Spring. We sparked through windows, 2 breasted bodies making love with syringes and welding gloves. Sweat glistened on Mama B's arms, and my belly free fell through the bed. Ovum, as you left the pod, my finger traced paths above. You bobbed in my narrows, waited for a swimmer to fuse with you. Early May, I held my arms for your imagined weight. Didn't know you had fallen, ghost speck in blood. Insemination 12. Laid on vinyl and foam cushioned table, I tilt pelvis, legs V'd toward white coat sleeves, graze wet fingertip over left nipple and moisten. Latex fingers glisten of stainless speculum, plastic shaft unsheathed, vial unscrewed, cream sucked, plunger thrust. Oh baby, please. Little blue. Rise up, little blue line, stop hiding. Drink my amber, little stick of maybe. Little blue, if you'll come, I'll praise and name you, little sign of mercy. Pregnancy magazine babies. Have you seen Glossy Dears, my daughter? She was sitting in my lap just yesterday, a sand-filled balloon. I scratched her head with feathery fingers, traced her secret name before she evaporated into milky breath. Faces, chocolate, carnelian, ivory, olive, show me my son, who shook my wrist as a cat swats string in moonlight. I followed him with heavy eyes, hypnotized by the muscle of his crawling. I kissed his almost invisible cheek, but like hair in the pond, he vanished. Which of you is my child? You, sleeping in some other woman's sling, have never known my breast. You, pawing the mobile in the yellow nursery, were not my little sandbag, were not my little cat. I will do whatever you say if you give me my child. I will nurse even if it hurts. I will stroller her around national parks. I will sing him love songs. I will carry a 7-inch knife. I will wear pink skirts, anything to bring her home, hear his laugh, feel her toes, let him break my heart. Another woman shoved down to the gravel. I am tired of being small, not hiking the Wissahickons capillaries for fear. Another woman shoved down to the gravel just last week. She got away. One day I'll hoist over the park stone walls, been building toward unassisted pull-ups, dreaming of lifting into trees above trails. I don't know if I could get away. I don't know that I could recite my Clifton, Hopkins, or Rich behind grit teeth, panicked eyes. But these arms, if they could punch as they write, if they could launch me into branches overhead, I might never stop climbing, might never be slaughtered in the woods, my head stuffed with other people's poems, all the words I never got to writing. One more poem from Cleve, and then I'll finish with the new one. It's called Poem to My Therapist About the Abyss. Between sessions, my Ferris wheel turns backward against time, and drowned selves surface like murky fish, little Darlas barely glimpsed as night darkens the pier over which the wheel spins. I once spun a few lunch breaks on this wheel's cool plastic seats, a girlfriend or grief saddled beside me. The ocean spread before us like glittered marble, crushed my lungs. I'd never be whole. Whole parts of ourselves cower, traumas our bodies bury, as mine did, I'd thought, years before Santa Monica reopened the bright wheel my mind revisits when anxious. And when I wrangle memory into phrases like hurling telephone, like nest of yanked hair, and when I holler for the conductor to halt, you remind me, breathe, ground, that beyond the dazzling wheel are the wide worn slats of the pier my bare feet have walked, the end of which is the same ocean as from above, but up close. Fish bodies darting, white queenfish, silver surf perch, birthing live fish from their own miraculous flesh, deep blue light and shadow weaving through currents, a whole body of salt-licked bodies alive and determined to live all the way to the unfathomable depths I once called abyss. Cleve ends with a long poem to my kid, Evelyn, but you'll have to read the book to hear that because I'm going to finish with a newer poem I worked on until midnight last night, so I don't actually know if it's the final draft, but that's okay. It's called I Cannot Carry My Child. I cannot carry my child because after the room my body furnished for her swelled the heat of long gestation, strained open and thrust forth her soft bones, her down slick weight, some divine musculature pressed against undulating walls. My body knew it housed the room that had once cradled her, and empty of its best thing, the shrunken walls sobbed holes the softest tissues of my guts could leak through. Even surgical mesh could not contain my body, which caved to the pressure from within the house of my hunger to carry her in open air I once hoped was clear, kindness, not gasps of mutating virus, not ash haze from blazes 2,500 miles west. Sand, wheat, strawberry, and dawn are her curls aloft in mid-afternoon sun when she towers on a brick wall I forbade her to climb, insistent I lift her down. A neighbor cups a tremble of feathers toward us, nods the root, and then swifts down sidewalk to re-nest his charge, which startles my kid into descent. And even now she houses a room within which could grow another, who too could house another, and like disc florets aswirl, sweat beads atop her 4-year-old nose, which I cover with cloth mask snugged over ears as her summer crown nuzzles my herniated abdomen. Help me carry my question. How fares the fledgling cupped through the poisoned air? Thank you.
Did you say that you wrote that yesterday?
No, I worked on my most recent draft yesterday.
Oh, I was like, what? I'm like, hello, thanks for throwing that down. Oh my gosh, beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing new work. That's a stunning iteration of the new draft. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, everyone, you now know what is inside of the book Cleave, if you didn't already. You now have a new understanding of what the word cleave means in all its permutations. And I appreciated so much these poems about the body at risk, in both through poems, as you said, about domestic violence, but also about birthing, both at risk, two sides of the prism. Thank you so much, Darla. What a poem, what a reading of poetry that really wrangled, to use your word, wrangled my my heart and soul and being today. Thank you. We now travel across the pond, as you always hear me say. And I want to share, we have folks here live with us today from Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Alaska, across the United States, New Mexico, all across the states. So for this already halfway through spectacular reading, I love how the poems are stitching together from Lori to Darla, and now as we move on to Kenneth, who is joining us this evening from Scotland, where he's been doing a very, very deep dive into landscape and seascape. Kenneth Steven is a full-time and widely published Scottish author, and he's best known as a poet because with some of his 16 collections and his newest work, his volume of selected work, Yannone, which was published by Paraclete Press here in the States. Kenneth has a very, very, very strong name. And thanks the many poetry related programs that he's written and presented for on BBC Radio. It is an honor and a joy to welcome to you all today to add our third stitch in the fabric, Kenneth Steven.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you for having me. Thank you and all the team for putting this together. It's a real privilege. It's a real joy. And I think I want to say from the outset that the little set of poems that I've swirled together which all come from the volume of new and selected work, Yannone, as you say, published by Paraclete, that I've deliberately tried to seek out a path with quiet, meditative pieces, really because of yesterday and all that both you in the States and we beyond the States were thinking in the light of that. So there are no deliberate and obvious bridges to yesterday and to 20 years of remembering of yesterday, but nevertheless the reading is, I think, it's prepared with that in mind. The first poem in the book is called Finding, and it remembers the most exciting birthday that I was ever asked to be part of. It is not about going on a particular night in the knowledge of finding a foe. It is the chance of it, that perhaps the making of time to try. The struggling up at 3 in the morning in the strangeness of the dark to get ready in soft voices, the going out into the fields on padded feet, no longer worrying about what tasks have been completed, which left undone. It is about walking together, leaving silvery trails uneven through long, lush grass, about coming at last to the place where you hoped it might happen. For some things are not certain. In this world where almost everything is written down and long decided, and always it has been that way. This water meadow where there is always scent of something not quite known, a bowl made of low hills, and round it the ancient trees held in the still dark. However many yards away, the foal already trying to hobble onto legs ridiculously big, and she pouring into him all the love that she possesses. Unself-consciously and with reverence, it is about kneeling in the long, wet grass to watch, to wonder. To say just a few tiny words about Iona, the title Iona, because I realized that it will be almost meaningless to many. It's worth mentioning. Iona, in a nutshell, is an island that bats way above its weight. It's a tiny little island west of here, where my wife and I live on the west coast of Scotland. And it was first visited. We don't know about its really truly ancient history, but it was visited first by the Druids, and then it was visited most famously by Columba, who became Saint Columba, from Ireland at the close of the 6th century AD. And from there, Columba was arriving with the Christian gospel, and from there monks went out to England, first of all, and then into Western Europe more widely. And Iona has been a touchstone. It's my spiritual home, and it has been the wellspring for much of the inspiration for my writing over the last however many years. One of the great treasures, the greatest treasure probably of the Celts, was the Book of Kells. And although that is today to be found in Dublin, it was, first of all, without doubt, written by 4 different hands, they know, on Iona. It was taken away from Iona because Iona had been raided, pillaged by the Vikings on several occasions, and the monks were wise enough to take it into safety. Anyway, a long introduction to a short poem. I wrote this poem. It was a precursor then to a novel called The Well of the North Wind. But I was imagining one of the hands behind the Book of Kells as being a hand from Ireland, from a young boy, a young calligrapher brought over to work on the Book of Kells. And this is his account, the illuminated manuscript. They brought me here from Ireland, still a boy, to begin their book. I remember the day I left. Soft bread, a silvering of geese, the sound of my mother. Now I slip the stone of these steps every day, long before dawn, breathe the dark, and hear the whelming of the winds about this fastness, before my one candle, like a petal of gorse, flutters the shadows and ghosts over the cold walls. Out of the thin window, I watch the sea all winter, heave and drag like a dying man, the skies blackened and bruised. Some days there is nothing in the pen except my own emptiness. I hold it hoping until the stars blow out from the attic of the skies and a ledge of moon lifts across the hills. Just sometimes something breaks inside like the brittle lid of a casket and pours out light onto the waiting page. One of my favorite places on the island, on Iona, is the hermit's cell. It's what I love about it, at the heart of all of it, is the fact that it's as desolate as it would have been 1,500 years ago when the hermit went over to live there from the tiny little wooden monastery as it would have been in the 5th, 6th century. And here I woke up with this poem. I wrote it on Iona, on the island, a few years ago. And it's always a wonderful privilege when something is found whole. And this came to me early on a Sunday morning. I woke up with it. But I stress that the voice is not my voice, it's that of the imagined hermit. the hermit's cell. I had to listen for a silence that was born inside. It took a whole year to find, and now it does not fail. I need nothing. All I want is where I am. I used to pray, and praying then was struggle with myself. Now I am made prayer. I'm hollowed out, a song that needs no sound. I pick the blow of flowers, bring them back in blues and reds and golds. And in the slow of winter dark, I watch for dawn and know that I am growing into light a little every day. I have seen otters off the coast of Yannone, but I admit that this poem was inspired by another island called Col, and seeing my first island there. All through childhood, I struggled. I got up early in the morning. I went to bed late, weeping because I couldn't see an otter on the west coast of Scotland. And so I gave up looking, and I saw one. So I realized that there was some kind of equation there. But this tiny little poem that is already shorter than the introduction to which I've given, it was inspired by the first otter that I saw off the island of Col. The small giant. The otter is 90% water, 10% God. This is a mastery we have not fathomed in a million years. I saw one once, off the teeth of Western Scotland, playing games with the Atlantic. 3 feet of gymnastics, taking on an ocean. Perhaps here in this tiny little fragment of a poem, I'm paying homage to a novel that really set me alight a few years ago, and is still setting me alight, I think. Cormac McCarthy's most wonderful, wonderful work, The Road. Now we are hard of hearing. The big world thunders in our ears and gives us all that we do not need. Just sometimes, a young deer turns in the early morning frost, and we see for a moment the beautiful road that lies like an ache in our blood. And this poem remembers going for the first time from where I was lecturing in Michigan to the Upper Peninsula. Just paying homage to the specialness, the wonder of that, arriving there on the most beautiful day in the middle of summer in Michigan. All day we went north and north, crossed the bridge to the Upper Peninsula. And there was something older there, an America everyone forgets. And the woods grew around us, and the blue glass of Lake Superior played and glanced in the white May light. And we came to a place called Paradise, and there was no more motorway, just a slowness to smiling, and kindness I'd all but forgotten, that we have left behind in our rush to get somewhere we don't want to be. There was birdsong in the trees, the laughter of children, the blue of the sky and the blue of the lake. The world was made of many blues, and I wanted to take off my shoes. And lastly, a tiny little sketch of a poem that I wrote just before lockdown began when I was leading a writing workshop up in the northeast of Scotland. And I don't think it needs much introduction because it's there. Otherwise, I'll just over-explain it with the words I add. The sacred place. I want to be there, but I cannot reach through the window to the high hills where snow has lain for weeks, a shield smoothed now in sunlight glinting. Yet if I were there, I would bring the weight of myself, made of so many mistakes, and it would not be any longer. Sometimes it is enough to see the perfect place and keep the snow unbroken.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Kenneth. I have to breathe a little bit. I keep taking those poems in. That poetry of the lyrical mindscape and landscape, that harmonic convergence that happens in your poems was just like this exquisite movement as we move from Darla's poems to yours. And really what I'm so struck by is that line, all I want is where I am. And I felt so much that each poem literally was the embodiment of that line, like bringing us to that place of being and centering and being able to experience from within what is beyond us and to take it back in. Thank you so much. Now you all are captivated by Yannone, I'm sure, in a way that you never knew before. Thank you. Very good evening. As I said, my friends, I love the serendipitous movements in the new book showcase as we move from one poet to another, and how each continues to add, layers to and depth to what we've heard before, and anticipation of what will come after. And so with that, I turn us to our final poet for today. Many of you know Grace Cavalieri from more than the place that I'm going to share, because she has had and continues to have an illustrious giving of her work to the world. And but we know her, of course, with deep fondness and heart as one of our laureate Love Fest poets from January. From February. Oh my gosh, I'm just so filled with all the poetry. I can't even get the months straight now. February is Valentine's Day, our laureate Love Fest. It is such a joy to have Grace Cavalieri return with us many months later to be able to showcase one of her new books. She's got two right now. And what a joy to be sharing another season with you, Grace, here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Grace Cavalieri is Maryland's 10th poet laureate. She's written 22 books and chapbooks of poetry, and 26 produced short form and full length plays. And her newest poetry publications are The Secret Letters of Madame de Stael from 2021 and What the Psychic Said from 2020. Her latest play was Quilting the Sun, Theater for the New City, New York City, 2019. And if you don't know this program, please become familiar yesterday. Grace has been the founder and still produces The Poet and the Poem on public radio, this year celebrating its 44th year on the air. The show is recorded at the Library of Congress and transmitted via Pacifica Network. It's always the greatest. I'm tongue-tied to welcome you. I'm tongue-tied.
I am tongue-tied to be welcomed. You are so generous. You are so kind. You give us reason to go on, and I'm so grateful to you. I'm going to read from What the Psychic Said. Love you, Sandy. The first couple of poems in this book are about being in love with an octopus. And how this happened is because I read that an octopus had 3 hearts, and that I thought, you know, this creature has 3 hearts and it's so ugly and it's such an anomaly, but has no one to love. So I'll just read a couple of these. The Picnic by the Ocean. The octopus offers me one of his 3 hearts, briar and holly for friendship in the second and third, save for times of longing, times of loss. A strange romance, I admit. Friends would never approve or believe, yet who is untouched by human hands? How can we say this is not a source of wonder? Who will sing my song if not you? He asked. Who will dream of me as I lay under the stillness of water? Even an octopus can be eloquent. And then again, as we know, enormous need can become power. What am I supposed to do now? I stand by the water, my woolen dress unraveling in the waves. The octopus has 3 hearts. With seaweed in my hair, I enter. Sun skims on top of the blue as I become one with breath. My lover sinks, flies down beyond currents. It's not unpleasant until now I realize how each shell is without birdsong. Shadows loom, waving yellow to amber, then blue, colors never seen before. You just have to go deep enough. Pieces of wreckage, pieces of what might have been flesh. What have I given up to get something I did not want? I never desired the octopus. I didn't want anyone else to have him. Is that wrong or just human? And who am I right now, swimming like a fish, to speak of being human? A traitor to all air and sunflowers. I gave up feet in warm sand, my bonnet, a chair, cycles of stars for a promise. And what was that secret now? I forget. Is to marry a sea creature a sin? And what is sex below the surface? Just when I think he's gone, he appears, ubiquitous, autonomous, filling all space. He'll never leave me alone, he says. That's what worries me, I think. It must be evening. I see clouds inciting the water, water reserved now for the last dark. He wraps his arms around me and holds on. The rest of this is about a relationship with someone you're struggling with, as all relationships are really a struggle, and living with someone who's to die in 3 years, because octopus only live 3 years. And that construct gave me the poems. The next one is about that devil of fame that everyone thinks they want. Now, in Italian, the word hunger is fame. Fame, hunger. This is called the mazurka. From the marsh of human discontent, from the grave of self-doubt, came a spark of life, a long-distance phone call from 4 young rappers who knew how I'd been grieving from lack of fame. They offered me a residency in South America, and they spoke of my breaking the mold with my work in libraries. They said I'd make quite a splash on YouTube. But when I asked if it was because of my elevated language, they said, to be honest, it's because when you dance, your nipples show through. Well, my husband said he'd come with me and was proud of my recognition among literary historians. So we all know that fame is an illusion. We all know that. Harbinger is coming to terms with age, and I am there. Harbinger, you'll never get it finished. Don't even try. You can never return a life payment of kindness and hurt. You'll never arouse your first love again. You'll never learn the geography of the archipelago or name those yellow flowers shaped like angels by the side of the road. And you don't even care anymore about who brought you the white straw hat. You'll never visit the snow in Russia or play chess or service a computer. Forget it. Not in this lifetime. Your skin will never be soft and pink as your first child's. Nothing is left. So just be good. Don't try to be good. Be good. How? Don't ask. Just do it. The rest is none of your business. Being locked up with COVID, the wishing for language was, the loneliness was the loss of language, which I want to hear. It's called Dear Word Prisoner. From here, you can see the water past craggy purple rocks, stretches of green, rusted rooftops, limed fields, yet this is not enough. Spirits need language. And what does it matter unless we can describe the outdoor air at dark, the late night owl or fox, walls leaning thick with loss, stones large with dirt and leaves and moss. Many souls lived and walked here on their way to heaven. What led them on, glittering with love or luck? Tell me, world, we can speak of. And if is not this the roaring of the ocean, the emptiness of winter's gate? I visited these places, but left for all the words that could not touch them. Anything I say, squeal, cry, yelp, sigh out loud, say something mouth, say summer, talk of hands that held here, whose the covert feathers rest silent in the tree for lack of sound from heart. Dear tongue, breath, don't leave me here alone with all this disappearing. This poem is asking for your love. This poem is not usually like this. I don't know what came over it. It's mostly violet under the sun with a large yellow parasol and a pond with a center that never freezes. I swear, I had no idea. I'm so used to trees of hearts and cherries within its branches. I can't imagine what woke this poem up with a truth I never wanted. It called out the tower window and said, I was alone. That in itself is a morbid lie. I have long shadows in autumn and clouds anytime there is a sky. In fact, everything was going so well until this poem wanted to undress me and bring back my love and hold me close and rub my forehead when I had a fever. It had no idea what trouble could come from this, so I wrote it. Then I ran from it. Now I can erase it to show I never needed it after all. Because don't you know, poem, if you have to ask for something, it's not a gift. Two more poems. The idea of the guns that come out of anywhere and go everywhere and shoot mindlessly, endlessly, without reason. I wrote a poem to the world asking, please let's not shoot the poets. Let's not shoot the poets. They fish at night and dig by day. They were not born for death. Their heavens are low enough to touch, flashing illumination and desire. They make spring beautiful. They listen in their heads for autumn's breaking. They create and work, turning dead wood to life. Society's not enough, so they fly above its deception and crash into clouds of meaning. The bucolic would not exist, but for their masterpiece. Hostile fire, stay away from the crush of boats crowding the shore with possible poets. They are like animals, birthing, but never forgetting their loss. Poems may be crushed, but memory is the hot gold made every day. They stay. I have been practicing poetry as a spiritual practice, and here's two small poems about that. Mudra. Every day I wake to find that I know nothing. The next day I find that I know even less. Today I learned that when I wake to consciousness, the cat will come to me. He doesn't need to see my open eyes. Today I learned the right hand on the heart will come as beating. I will not know this until I touch my heart. After that again, I will know nothing. And the final poem, and thank you so much for being with me and for giving us all reason to go on. It's called Just This. The water to the left, turning, then to the right, past barbed fences, leaning past trees, once again, alive, up, then down the valley. You like what you see, spring, summer, it doesn't matter. To walk by the water is to see white seasons turning green to blue, swarms of flying sparks with wings in the closing darkness. Then morning comes past your sight, verging, so we want to close our eyes, then to open to find some meaning, find purpose for movement, and we slow down, then we find there is no meaning, but motion. Just this. Again, just this. Thank you from my heart. Thank you from my heart.
Grace, I love you. And
I love, love, love you. And you're going to be on my radio program. We're recording Tuesday, and we'll have a podcast out by the end of the week to thrill and delight.
thank you. I want to say that your poetry, as I was saying, I love the movement of this reading today, and moving from Kenneth to the ecstatic that you were able to bring, but also the meditative, like there's a deepness to the waters where you took us also. The octopus as you said, has 3 hearts. And I have to say that after listening to you today, I think many of us may have moved from having 1 heart to 3 hearts. Here's to everyone for joining in this heartfelt practice of listening and writing poetry that we engage with. I want to thank all of our poets. As I said, this to me felt like a symphony today, like this really perfect movement of poet to poet to poet to poet. I just felt like I was at some fabulous music event. So thank you to Lori Wilson, Darla Himelas, Kenneth Steven, and Grace Cavalieri. Everybody, if you want to take a moment, how about we unmute and show our appreciation and our hearts to these
Hooray.
4 beautiful.
Wonderful reading.
Magnificent.
Fabulous.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Bravo. Bravo.
Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you.
Sandy. Thank
Wonderful
you,
poem.
Thank you,
poets.
Thank you, Sandy.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, you have been joining us today for our new books showcase. As I said, when we book folks and we say a new book is about a year in the making from the time folks join us. But what we heard in their books today is how poetry endures and takes us through time, immemorial time, actually. I want to remind you that you can rewatch today's program at your leisure on our Cultivating Voices Live Facebook page and on YouTube. Thank you so much to Don Krieger for that. And thank you to all of you for being with us. If you have any upcoming readings or announcements, this would be a great time to put them in the chat to let folks know what you're up to this upcoming week. I want to remind you to join us back here next Sunday. We will be having our wild card open mic. I think I'm going to need to get a deck of cards now. I'm going to have a deck of cards like for the wild card, where you all can be the features. 12 of you, 6 minutes apiece for our next reading on Sunday. Come sign up 15 minutes prior to the reading here in Zoom and join us back on September 26th on Sunday, back for our final reading of September, back with our new book showcase. Carolyn Wright will be joining us again after Lily Ledbetter, but with her own book. We'll be having Claire Kelly joining us from Canada, and Jim Seelar and Marge Sizer will be joining us from the Midwest. Again, you can register for all of the Cultivating Voices live poetry readings, as you know, on our event page. And thanks, of course, always to Don Krieger and Kim Ports Parsons for all their support in putting together the reading series. As I say every week, but really feeling it quite viscerally today, our humanity truly depends on our deep listening of one another. So please take very good care of yourselves and your beloveds. My friends, keep writing and bring those poems to us next week. Take good care. We'll see you soon. Love to all.